The vision of the child Jesus with his little friends, Jude and James, playing, raises some very important points which are belied by the simplicity of the vision. And because our Lord didn't comment on it, I think I will. It's about the subject, the theme, which animated their play. When I was a kid, we never played like that. We never took Bible stories and played based on those Bible stories, acting out biblical characters. And this leads us to the question of story and what its purpose is. Well, of course, there are pointless stories. But there are ancient stories which convey very important messages. And traditionally, stories were the way a tribe would pass on its values. You don't do it in a kind of didactic way. You don't have a classroom and a blackboard and set out the values in a list of 100 and ask them to be memorised. They're conveyed through stories. And in fact, the world religions, whether they're true or false, they convey their values through their community values through story. So, you have a certain kind of civilization in Europe. Let's not count Europe of the 21st century, but say Europe at the end of the 19th century. A certain kind of civilization. You had a distinctly different kind of civilization in the Islamic world, distinctly different civilization again in, say, China. And if you went back to 15th century South America, in what is now Mexico, or further south, you'd have different civilizations again. The stories of gods and goddesses are means, no matter how false they are, of transmitting community values. And they can be nasty values, as we found with the Aztecs. But God deigned to free the South Americans from those demonic gods, no matter what modern liberals say. But we in the West are not Christian anymore. We once were. The Christian story animated us. So what's removed that? Well, you could take evolution theory, which is another story or set of stories. And if you think it's, just scientific fact, well, how is it that a very able man like Richard Dawkins believes in gradual evolution? I mean, it's all very gradual anyway, no matter what, of course. It takes place over untold millions of years. But it's very gradualistic, small changes within populations. But Stephen Jay Gould believed in something called punctuated equilibrium, a theory which Dawkins rejects. There'd be fairly rapid changes on the fringes of a population group that eventually work their way into the entire population over time. They both use the same data, the punctuated equilibriumists and the gradualists, but they come to different conclusions. None of them work on the basis of Charles Darwin, who didn't see that changes happen other than by this continuous process of natural selection, not knowing about genetics because he didn't have the Augustinian monks work on peas, which initiated genetic science. He didn't have that to refer to. Whereas, actually, that work of Gregor Mendel apparently was found in Darwin's library after his death, but it looked like it had not been read. So we need mutations to take place for evolution to happen, but Darwin knew nothing of that. Then at the 19th century, they have the hopeful monster. These things are not believed in by modern evolutionists. So they're changing, if I won't say all the time, they're changing often enough for it to be clear that there are different stories of evolution. So it's a story, and that story has supplanted the Christian story in a negative sense, in the sense that it is simply disposed of Christianity. Or you might say, no, it hasn't. You can be an evolutionary theist Well, good luck with the story of original sin. If you can work it out, I've thought about it many times over many years, and the idea that you could have suddenly an Adam and Eve coming into existence after billions of years of animal-human types, killing and eating each other, doesn't sound really like it gels with St. Paul saying that death came into the world through one man. If death was abundant and everywhere already. But that's for the evolutionary theists to talk about. Another story we have, which operates more positively, but not in a good way, it simply has not just removed Christianity, is actually put forward something else, is Hollywood. And if you want to know what Hollywood is, or who Hollywood is, you do well to pick up a book called An Empire of Their Own by a chap called Neil Gabler. Neil Gabler describes how Jewish emigres at the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, developed this phenomenon. And of course, being the phenomenon it is, it has provided a whole series of motion pictures which convey their own stories to modern man. And those stories, though here and there in the days when America was strongly Christian, they had to produce Christian films, such as The Ten Commandments, which, alright, it's about the Old Testament, but if it weren't a Christian population, they'd not have made it. They had to make money out of these films. Cecil B. DeMille's Ten Commandments, 1956, I think. And you got, say, King of Kings, about Jesus' life, which is about 1961. And there was a 1965 telling of the life of Jesus, starring Max von Sydow, but I can't remember the title of that film. These are few and far between. And really, they were produced in the age of what was called the production code, where the Catholic Church, substantially the Catholic Church, forced on Hollywood when it was quite weak because it had lots of debt from all the investment in talking pictures, and then followed the Depression, so there were very few people paying to watch these movies. The Catholic Church could say, do X, Y, Z, or we will boycott you. And if the Catholic Church had organised the boycott, which it could in those days, those places would have gone bankrupt. So they agreed to the production code, which set standards, things you could not show, things you could not say in movies. And that pretty much prevailed until a film called The Pawnbroker, starring the great Rod Steiger in 1965. A Holocaust-based film where a prostitute showed her naked torso. It was unnecessary. It was designed to break the production code, and it did. But for that 30-year period, from 1934 to 65, we pretty much had decency in films.